Hey guys, how's everyone doing? My name's Ryan, and today I'm going to be telling a life story about how I almost died in Morocco, not once, but actually on two separate occasions, the first of which actually took place in 2014, and after all the events that transpired, a lot of people probably wouldn't have gone back. I did in 2017, just 3 years later, and I actually almost died again. So you guys are probably wondering, who is this dude Ryan? How did he almost die? Not once, but twice. And why in the hell would he go back to a country where he had such a traumatic experience just a few years previous? Well, to be honest, it's an incredibly beautiful country, and still to this day, I highly recommend a visit. And who knows, Morocco, if I go back, maybe third time's the charm, and you'll finally kill me. Dude, that was a super morbid comment. Just get into the story. All right, fine. We'll get into the story. I swear I'm not crazy. So let's take you back to October of 2014. At the time, I was actually studying abroad in Barcelona, Spain. I was 20 years old, and I'd been living in Barcelona for about a month at this point. I think we moved in maybe September 15th or September 16th. And generally I was having a really good time. It was a big step for me. My first time being in Europe, my first time really being away from my family, to be honest. This was my junior year, fall semester of college. I actually grew up in New Jersey, for those of you that don't know. I went to school out in Pittsburgh. So you're definitely away from home, but it's completely different than being 6 hours ahead in terms of the time difference and only being able to get home by a plane, and you're basically not going home. When you go to study abroad, you're going to be staying there for the duration of the program. It's not like when you're in Pittsburgh and you can just hop on a bus and be home in 5 or 6 hours. So it was definitely a big step for me. I feel like I was taking it in full stride and really trying to take in as much of the culture as I can. Obviously, Barcelona is an incredible city in the summer, and there's a ton of activities always going on. So by mid-October, I was definitely kind of settled in Barcelona, really enjoying my time there, while at the same time was also trying to plan some weekend trip. When you study abroad, at least the program that I did, all the classes that I took were pass-fail. So you didn't have to necessarily take them really seriously. I think you just needed to get like a C+, and I was taking really interesting courses. I was taking like the history and culture of FC Barcelona, the soccer team. Most of the classes were generally a joke. I had class Monday through Thursday, and then the weekends are pretty much up to us to use the time as we wished. So I used this free time to take a lot of trips on the weekend. A few of the different places that I visited when I was over there are Tenerife in the Canary Islands. I went to England, I went to Ireland as well. I'm Irish, so that was definitely a cool experience for me. So all the trips I just mentioned, these were actually trips that I planned on my own. However, at the same time, our study abroad provider, ISA, actually had sponsored trips. A few of them were actually prepaid, so they were kind of like longer weekend trips. One of them was down to Sitges, which is a beach town about 30 or 40 miles south of Barcelona. That was included in the cost of the study abroad program. There's also another trip up to Toulouse in France, which I think was a long weekend, like 4 days. And one of the other trips that was of particular interest to me when I first signed up for the ISA study abroad program in Barcelona was that they actually do a trip down to Morocco for, I believe it was 5 or 6 days, so it was actually like a decently long trip. This is actually one that wasn't included in the cost of the study abroad program. However, it was kind of already pre-discounted. So I think for the entire trip, for travel, all the accommodations, all the different excursions and things that we would be doing, I think it was around like 400 euro or something like that. So for 6 days, that's super reasonable. That's basically a vacation from the vacation that I was having while I was studying abroad. So I remember when I first got there, you had the option of signing up. This was in like early September, and I was like, I have to do it. Morocco's an incredibly cool country just from what I thought about it and my perceptions of it at the time, because I'm gonna be going somewhere that's completely unlike anywhere I've ever been. Morocco is a third world country. It is a country that's part of the Muslim world. You could argue that by going over to Barcelona, I was already stepping out of my comfort zone enough. Why do you need to go somewhere that's even drastically different than Spain when you're studying abroad there? But I'm kind of someone that likes to step out of my comfort zone. I think it allows us to grow in ways that, we never previously perceived possible. So this is somewhere that I was absolutely sure I was definitely going to go. So basically this trip was set up that anyone that was doing an ISA study abroad program in any Spanish city would be able to participate. So I remember meeting people that were doing the ISA Salamanca program, ISA Madrid, ISA Barcelona, and then ISA Sevilla as well. So I say Sevilla because Sevilla was actually the city that we all met in. And if you guys are familiar with geography within Spain, you'll know that Sevilla is further towards the south. So I had to take a flight down to Sevilla. I did that. It was really cheap on Ryanair. That wasn't included in the cost of the program, but it was probably like $39 or something like that. So we all met down in Sevilla, everyone from the different programs. I remember getting in at nighttime. It was relatively late. There was a few other people from the ISA Barcelona program that were on my flight. And I remember some people didn't even have like an Airbnb or a hotel book. They were just like, yo, we'll just like go out in Sevilla, and the bus was set to leave at 5 a.m. So we were all essentially going to be going on a bus that was going to take us down to Algeciras, which is a port city in southern Spain. And then we were gonna be taking that across the Strait of Gibraltar to Morocco. So some people are like, yeah, we're gonna stay out all night, you know, it's gonna be fun, it's gonna be fine. But I was kind of like, you know, I kind of want to get a hotel. We're gonna be doing a lot of traveling. We were gonna be on a bus for like 18 hours or something like that. I did get a hotel, but by the time I got in, it was like midnight. And then I think the bus was leaving at like 5 a.m. I think I got maybe 2 or 3 hours of sleep before I had to head over to the bus. I think I woke up early. I was like, I do not want to miss this bus and, you know, miss this entire trip that I prepaid for. But anyway, I had like a suitcase. It was like a small suitcase full of all my luggage. I remember when I was in Spain at the time, I didn't pay for cell phone service at all. So I had to look up directions while I was still on the Wi-Fi. So I like had my phone out and I'm like walking through the streets of Sevilla in like pitch black, trying to figure out where this bus was. So I finally was able to locate it. And I think I was there pretty early. So everyone got on the bus and then we drove down to Algeciras. By the time we got there, it was actually incredibly beautiful. Got on the ferry. It was actually like a massive ferry. So our entire bus could fit on there as well, because that was gonna be the same bus that was gonna be driving us around, you know, the countryside in Morocco. And I remember as we got on the ferry, the sun was actually rising and there's this massive rock. So again, if you're familiar with southern Spain, or if you're not, I can kind of educate you here a little bit. Right next to Algeciras is the British enclave of Gibraltar, which is basically just a part of the United Kingdom, but it's within Spain. It's kind of strange, but there are British people that live there. There's this massive rock that's kind of at the edge of the water, and I remember us getting on the ferry distinctly. I remember looking over to the left and just seeing the sunrise behind this, I don't know the exact name of it, but it's this massive rock in Gibraltar, and I was like, this is incredible. This is gonna be a great trip. I'm really excited. Like, we're going to Morocco, let's do this. So if you guys are ever going to Morocco in the future from Spain, there's a few things you should know. There's a couple ports that you can use to get over to Morocco. So the first time, in this first story that I'm telling, we used Algeciras, but I also used Tarifa in the past. And then when you take the ferry across, there's definitely a couple different ports that you can go into as well. So on this trip in 2014, we actually went to Cueta, which is actually a Spanish enclave on the African continent. So you go across the Strait of Gibraltar, you're in Africa, and I didn't actually know this at the time, but we arrived and we didn't have to go through any customs or anything like that. I was confused. I'm like, we're in Morocco, we're in Africa now, what's the deal with this? I found out very quickly that we were actually in Cueta, which is this Spanish enclave that's still a part of the European Union, still a part of Spain, but on the African continent. So anyway, we all got off the bus, well, we got off the ferry, got back onto the bus, packed all of our stuff, and then we had to drive about, you know, maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles, because the whole area that's a part of the city of Cueta, which is this Spanish enclave, is very small. So we got on the bus, we got to the border. I remember the border, it was super backed up. One thing to note about Morocco is they're really big on counterterrorism. Tourism is such a huge industry for them that if anything were to happen to tourists there, and you guys may have seen in the news that, you know, recently, unfortunately, something did happen to tourists, but before that, there weren't any incidents in like 2004 or a really long time. So they really want to make sure that they're doing, you know, a good job with border security and everything like that. So I definitely hear it. But I remember distinctly that they checked all of our passports, and I remember there was a couple guys that got on the bus and they actually had like AK-47 assault rifles. So I was like, all right, this is a little different than, you know, what I'm used to back in the States. But we were able to get through the border. And I remember that the first city that we were going to be driving to was Fes. So Fes is kind of in the center of Morocco. I don't remember exactly how many hours driving it was from the port of Cueta, but it was definitely decently far. And I remember getting into Fes in the nighttime. So it's kind of the cultural hub of Morocco. We stayed very close to the Medina. So the Medina is basically this whole medieval, over 1,000-year-old area of Morocco. And this is essentially the old city where people would live previously. And it's pretty much preserved in many ways from the way that it used to be. Like, you can still see the small markets. It's really cool to walk around in there. You know, it really feels like you're on like a movie set for a film that was filmed during medieval times. So I had a really good time in Fes. Honestly, it's an incredible city, but I think the part of the trip that I was most excited for was what was going to be coming next. So essentially the next leg of the trip was going to take us down to the Sahara Desert, and we were going to be staying in a desert camp there, where you'd be basically just in these really small rudimentary tents. That was definitely something that was on the horizon. So I remember when we left Fes, we had about a 7-hour drive just to get to the city, where we would ultimately have to actually transfer and get into these kind of all-terrain off-road vehicles like Toyota Land Cruisers and like Land Rover Defenders. Essentially the only way to get to this small village, the name of the city was Merzouga, and we kind of be staying on the outskirts of that. The only way to get there was actually by going straight across the desert. There's no roads that get there. You know, this is the part of the desert that's not the type of sand like that you see in the dunes, but kind of leading up to it, it's kind of more refined sand. So essentially what we had to do is we drove 7 hours to the city of Arfoud, or Arfoud, I think it was. And essentially to get there, we had to go over the Atlas Mountains, which is a huge mountain range in northern Africa. And I remember doing that on our bus. The roads were super treacherous, and we were definitely, it was a pretty big bus. Like there's probably like 50, 60 of us in total that were going on the trip. The roads that we were going on, I'm not so sure they could support the type of bus that we had. So there was a couple nervy moments where we were kind of looking over a cliff and there was very minimal guardrail, if any guardrail at all. The fact that we were so nervous was kind of proven to be valid, because when we went around one of the turns, there was no guardrail on this turn. The thing was, on the way there, we're like, this is a super treacherous area. Like I wouldn't be surprised if a car would be able to go over this cliff here. What we saw on the way back after going to the desert was that a car actually was overturned at the bottom of this ravine, like 100 feet down. So obviously the fact that we thought it was, you know, pretty treacherous, we weren't so far off, and within the 3 days that we were in the desert, something clearly happened. But despite the fact that the roads were super treacherous, we did finally make it there. So we made it to Arfoud, we got into our all-terrain vehicles, and then we had to drive for an additional hour, finally getting to the city of Merzouga. I think it was almost like around dinner time when we got there. And my time in Merzouga in the camp was honestly really great. It was super relaxing. I remember just like going out on top of the sand dunes and like looking at the stars, and it was like the most clear sky I had ever seen before. You know, growing up in New Jersey, we have like a ton of light pollution, and now I live in Jersey City, so it's like the city of New York is like right across the river, so I don't really get a chance to look at the stars. But I just remember looking up and I was like, completely clear sky, just kind of laying out on the sand dunes. It was a very comfortable temperature because it's October in Morocco, so I think it was like in the 60s at night and the low to mid 70s in the day. So honestly, if you're going to Morocco, it's a great time of year to go. But I remember just being out in the desert, having conversations with the local Berber people. Essentially the Berbers are nomads that kind of just travel throughout kind of the more remote regions of Morocco, kind of Algeria, all of North Africa. So it was just kind of interesting to hear their perspective on life. I remember we did a lot of things around the campfire, like there was a lot of like drumming and storytelling. I remember just completely disconnecting from technology. There were also local kids from the village, and we remember we played a pickup soccer game. They had all like, you know, Barcelona, Borussia Dortmund, they're huge soccer fans down in Morocco. So I remember we played a pickup game with them, you know, myself and the other students that were doing the study abroad program. Overall, it was just like a really cool experience. And one other thing of note that's going to come into play later in this story is all the food that we had when we were there was catered, it was provided for, and this camp was pretty much used to having a lot of Western tourists. I think that for the most part it was a lot of like European tourists from like Western Europe, like Spain, England, France. And because they were used to catering to Western tourists, we kind of knew to a high degree of certainty that the food that we would be eating wouldn't be getting us sick. Because one of the things that we heard going into our trip to Morocco is that you have to be very careful with the food that you're eating in Morocco. With the water, you can't even use the water to brush your teeth if it enters your mouth. There's just certain types of bacteria and things that are not in the water in like Western Europe and the United States, and if you even have just like one little bit of it, you can get super sick. So they warned us very well about that, so we made sure that we always had water bottles, that was always provided for us. I remember stocking up on it before we went into the desert to make sure that we were staying hydrated. And one other note about the camp was that we were always sipping on this Moroccan mint tea that is like a staple to Morocco. Super good tea. We were doing all these activities by day. You know, we rode camels through the Sahara. If you're going to the Sahara Desert, riding a camel is definitely a must. We did some sandboarding as well. Remember, we rented a sandboard for like $10 for the day, or 10 euros. You could basically kind of snowboard down the sand dunes. So we were doing all these fun activities by day, hanging out by the fire, disconnecting from technology, and sipping on this Moroccan mint tea by night. And overall, Merzouga is an incredible place. I remember that when we had to leave, I was like totally not ready to go. Although we did have kind of one more city on our itinerary. We get back on the bus after getting into the all-terrain vehicles. We get back on the bus in Arfoud, and I was like, damn, I wish we could have spent a couple, you know, additional days here, just given that it was such a magical experience. But we had one more city that we had to go to, which was Meknes. Again, Meknes is going to be back further north, so we kind of had another super long, like 7-hour drive to get back to the center of the country. And it's actually relatively close to Fes, which was the first city that we spent some time in. And on the way to Meknes, I remember, given the fact that we were on the bus for 7 hours, of course we had to stop to get, you know, some type of refreshments, some food. I remember getting some food. I don't even remember what I got, to be honest, but I also remember that I had the Moroccan mint tea. And again, we were told not to drink the water whatsoever, but I was like, okay, this water has been boiled. Clearly it's fine. And I've been having this tea the entire trip. Although when I was having the tea previously, I was out at this camp. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but this is gonna kind of play into later in the story, because once we actually got to the hotel in Meknes, I forget what time we got there. It was probably like a little bit, it was probably like 4 or 5 p.m. or something like that. And then I remember we actually had a dinner that was at the hotel, so it was kind of a catered dinner that was provided for our group. I still felt totally fine, like wasn't thinking about anything, was just like, this is a great trip, you know, this is our last city, I want to enjoy it before I head back up to Barcelona. I just remember at the dinner table just not really feeling good. Like I kind of felt like chills that were coming over me. To be honest, it came on really fast. I remember I was just like really uncomfortable. I started like sweating and like having chills. I made it through dinner, and then I don't even know what everyone else was doing, but I went up to my room and I remember that I just kind of laid in the bed and I was like, shit, like I'm not feeling well. Like I'm not feeling well at all. I started having even like really intense sweats, really bad chills. My entire body started like shaking. Although, you know, this didn't all happen at once, of course. It kind of escalated. It did happen pretty fast. It was probably over the course of feeling fine when we got to dinner to basically shaking, having a super high fever, sweating, chills, basically really, really bad symptoms. I didn't know what was going on within an hour. And then the next thing I knew, I was in the bathroom and I was having like the worst diarrhea that I've had my entire life. Prior to that, you know, it's getting pretty late at this point. It's probably like 11 p.m. going on midnight. I was kind of just having like really bad symptoms, like flu-like symptoms almost. Like I was shaking, I was basically like having tremors. And a lot of the times when you have, you know, stomach issues going on and you go to the bathroom, it makes it, you know, your general symptoms better and you start feeling better. That wasn't the case with this at all. My kind of flu-like symptoms with the shaking, with, you know, sweating profusely, with the fever, all of that just continued to get worse throughout the night. And I remember the roommate that I was staying with, this dude, I think he was from Michigan originally. Basically, we were staying in this hotel and you had one roommate that you'd be staying with through the duration of the trip. You know, they're not going to give each of us as individuals our own rooms. But I remember he was helping me a ton. We were in contact with the program director. They gave me some type of medicine. I'm not sure if it was for, you know, when you're having diarrhea specifically or exactly what they gave me, but it didn't seem to help at all. I didn't sleep the entire night, and I knew that the next day was the day that we were going to be taking the bus back to Sevilla. From Meknes, I want to say with the ferry and everything included, it was going to be like 12, 13 hours. I was basically like still shaking, had a really bad fever. There was no way I was going to be able to stay on that bus for 12 to 13 hours. Like it wasn't going to be good for, you know, the other people that were on it. It wasn't going to be a good experience for anyone, and I felt like I was like dying basically. So what I decided doing is, I think it was early that morning while I was just like laying in bed, like thinking I'm dying. They basically told me that I shouldn't be going to a hospital in Morocco. Like you're gonna be waiting a super long time. They didn't recommend it at all. They gave me the medicine. They said, wait till the morning. And then we recommend that you try to get a flight back to Barcelona so you can go to the hospital there. So I was like, okay. So I was also in contact with my parents at this point, kind of just letting them know that, you know, I don't even know if it was smart at the time to let them know that I'm not feeling well. There wasn't anything that they could do about it. And I remember my younger brother, specifically my brother Connor, he was like freaking out. He was so angry at my parents. He's like, why would you let him go to Africa? He has Ebola. He has Ebola. And I was like, I don't have Ebola. I knew at the time that I didn't have Ebola, and the reason that he was so scared about it was because back in 2014 was when in Liberia the Ebola crisis was kind of reaching a peak. I guess my brother thought, oh, he's in Africa, although Africa is a massive continent, and there was no reported cases of Ebola in Morocco. I remember looking up after, there was actually more cases of it in the United States. But needless to say, my family was super worried, but they knew what was going on. I was able to get a flight. It wasn't a cheap flight from Fes direct to Barcelona. I think it was like Welling was the provider. It's funny because still to this day, I'm still subscribed to their email notifications. And whenever I see that, I think about this trip and like the fact that I like almost died. So anyway, we were in Meknes, so we had to get over to Fes, right? So it's like an hour drive. So basically what happened is there was a ISA study abroad program that was based in Meknes, and one of the program directors actually offered to get a cab and to drive over with me to the Fes airport. And I had a flight, I don't remember what time it was, let's say it was like 11 a.m., like 12 p.m., something like that. We got in the cab and I remember just like laying in the back seat because I should have been in a hospital. Like I needed to be on fluids, basically. I needed to be on IVs. I was losing so much fluid. And whenever I drank water or tried to keep anything down, it wasn't working. I just was having persistent diarrhea. So I finally made it over to the airport in Fes. It was like an hour and a half drive. No seatbelt in the back seat of this cab whatsoever. Just some random, you know, Moroccan taxi driver and some other, you know, local Moroccan guy that was the program director for the ISA program in Meknes. We finally got to the airport. I was basically like in a daze. I had no idea what was going on. By the time I got on the flight, it was the worst flight of my life. You know, it's not that far of a flight. It was probably like, I don't know, an hour and a half or less, but it felt like the longest experience of my life. I felt like nauseous, like I was gonna throw up on the plane. I actually didn't, but it felt like I wanted to, which is honestly like almost worse, I feel like. But I eventually, you know, I survived the flight, got into Barcelona, was like ready to pass out, like looking like I'm ready to like fall over or something. And then again, shout out to ISA, they did a great job. One of their other program directors was waiting for me. We got a cab. We went over to the hospital in Barcelona. Don't remember which hospital exactly. Obviously, it's a huge city. They have a ton of hospitals, but they took me over there. They got me on IVs. I think they gave me some type of antibiotic as well. They never actually confirmed what type of bacteria that I had. They didn't say for sure if it was from the water, if it was from the tea that I drank or some of the food. They didn't know exactly, but they just diagnosed it as traveler's diarrhea. I'll never really know exactly what it was, but to be honest, I was in the hospital for over 48 hours. Like it was like 2.5 days, honestly, before I finally got out. And I was feeling better. The thing about this, and as you guys will hear in my story from 2017, which is actually even like more crazy than this, the good part was it came on really fast, but it went away relatively fast. And when I say it went away, it didn't completely go away because I actually didn't go to the bathroom. Like I didn't shit normally for like 3 months. Like I was back in the United States in December, still not shitting, completely normal. But in terms of like the really bad like flu-like symptoms, that was gone within like 2 days. And I was just like completely freaked out. I remember like I went to class the next day and like some of the people that were on the trip with me, they're like, dude, are you okay? Like, are you alive? And I was like, don't worry guys, like I made it, I'm back, I'm okay. But just in general, it was like a really, really crazy trip. So the moral of the story, guys, is when you're traveling, things can happen that are completely out of your control. There's nothing I could have really done differently to prepare for that. That's not to say that it should, worry you or deter you from going to these places, because even though this happened, I understood I was traveling to a third world country and there were going to be some risks that were associated with that. It didn't stop me from going, and it didn't stop me from going again. And as you guys will see, I'm actually going to be posting my next travel life story, which is actually when I did return to Morocco in the fall of 2017. So this obviously didn't deter me. And sure enough, when I went again in 2017, I actually almost died this time. Because I say in 2014 in this story, you guys saw like it was pretty bad, but I never actually thought I was gonna die. However, in 2017 when I got back, there was a point where I got to where I was like fully accepting the fact that I might be dying. And to be honest, that's a really scary thought. I mean, it took me, after 2017, as you guys will hear in the story next week, it took me many months to actually mentally recover from what happened. At the end of the day, I was able to live through these experiences in 2014 and 2017, and I'm able to tell you guys these stories here today, and I think that's a pretty powerful thing to be able to overcome these things. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up rating if you guys did enjoy, and be sure to subscribe to Awaken Atlas. I have a lot of great content coming out over the upcoming weeks. Some more real life travel stories, some travel vlogs as well. I kind of like to mix it up. I think you guys are going to enjoy. But anyway, thanks for hanging out today and watching the video. Until next time, guys, I hope you have a great day.